Ever feel like you're just drowning in information? Wishing you could just get the core insights without spending ages digging through papers.
Absolutely. It's a common feeling.
Yeah, well, that's exactly why we do the deep dive. It's kind of your shortcut to getting properly informed, designed just for you, our listeners.
And today we've got something really fascinating.
We do. Today we're diving deep into this really interesting research paper from way back in the late 1970s. It's called Food Intakes and Pattern of Consumption Among Elderly Nigerians with a Low Income.
Quite a title.
Right. And our mission here is to really unpack the surprising stuff about diet, health, and resilience in a population that, frankly, doesn't get studied that often. We want to pull out those key nuggets of knowledge that might actually challenge, some common ideas about nutrition and getting older.
Like that central paradox you mentioned earlier.
Exactly. Like, what if a study found serious nutrient deficiencies, but somehow overall health was still seen as, satisfactory? How does that even work? That's the kind of thing we're getting into.
And for this deep dive, we're focusing entirely on this single source, this one research paper.
Which means we can go really deep.
Precisely. It lets us explore its findings in incredible detail.
Okay, so let's start setting the stage then. Why focus on the diet of the elderly, especially, in this specific low-income setting? Why was this research important back then, and why does it still matter?
Well, globally, elderly nutrition is a big challenge. Malnutrition, poor health, they're pretty common issues for older people, and particularly so in developing countries.
Right.
And this paper, it highlights a few reasons why. For example, many older people preferred living in rural areas.
Why was that?
Often lower living costs, yeah. And also opportunities to grow some of their own food, home gardening.
Okay. Makes sense.
Then there's the support from children, which could be, inconsistent. Some kids brought food regularly, but some elderly folks might depend entirely on them. And you also have psychological factors, things like loneliness, losing a spouse, maybe just apathy.
Yeah.
These can really mess with eating habits.
Yeah, I can see that.
And fundamentally, a diet that's just not adequate causes real physiological stress on the body.
So it sounds like a really complex web of factors. This study, even though it's decades old, feels like it gives us such a vital snapshot of these challenges, doesn't it?
It really does. It underlines why this kind of focused research is so critical.
Okay, so let's zoom in then. Where did this actually happen? Who took part? And how did the researchers get all this information? This is where it gets really interesting, I think.
Definitely. So the study took place in Nigeria's Cross River State, both rural and urban areas, places like Abak, Calabar, ICOM. Several government areas were included. It's a region with high rainfall, known for crops like yam, cocoyam, maize, rice. The paper notes they had lots of fish products around, but commercial protein sources, pretty scarce.
Gotcha. And the participants?
Right. There were 307 subjects in total, 173 older men, 134 older women, and crucially, all were from low-income families, and all were 60 or older.
60 plus, low income.
Yeah.
And the data collection, you said it was thorough.
Oh, yeah. Incredibly thorough. It happened over 2 years, 77 to 79. They used detailed questionnaires covering everything, socioeconomic status, health, what they ate, even how they cooked it.
Wow.
And here's the key part. They actually weighed the food people ate daily for 7 days straight.
Weighed it every day.
Every day, including anything eaten outside the home. They classified items as raw or cooked, recorded the edible portion. It was meticulous.
That is serious commitment.
It is. And then they calculated the energy and nutrients using standard food composition tables from back then. They also mentioned something called age mates.
Age mates, was that?
It's a cultural thing. Basically, people born within about 2 years of each other, they form traditional social groups. Just an interesting detail they included.
Huh. Okay, that's incredibly detailed for the 70s. So after all that weighing and questioning, what were these folks actually eating? What did a typical week look like on their plates?
Well, it was heavily based on starchy foods.
Yeah.
Cassava was huge. 90% of people ate it. Yam, 86%. Cocoyam, 75%. Maize, 70%. These were the absolute staples.
Okay, lots of root vegetables and grains. What about protein?
Protein. Smoked fish was the main source of animal protein. About 87% consumed it.
Smoked fish, okay.
But other animal proteins, very rare. Get this. Eggs, only 7%. Poultry, like chicken, just 5%. And meat, only 2%.
2%, wow. That's strikingly low.
It really is. On the flip side, though, vegetables were almost universal. 98% ate them. And palm wine was also very common, 96%.
Palm wine, interesting. So can you give us a taste? Like, what's an example meal?
Yeah, the paper gives a sample menu. So, like, Sunday breakfast might be boiled yam and oil and salt. Vary. Monday lunch could be cassava okra soup. Tuesday supper, maybe grated cocoyam. It gives you a real feel for the repetition and the reliance on those staples.
It really does. It's fascinating how central just a few foods were.
Yeah.
And that tiny amount of meat, eggs, it's so different from what many might think of as a, quote, balanced diet today.
Completely. It really highlights the adaptation needed just for basic sustenance in that environment. Kind of efficient, in a way.
Yeah, efficient. Okay, so we have this picture. Lots of starch, some veg, smoked fish, very little else in terms of animal protein. So what did this mean nutritionally? What did the researchers find when they compared intake to the established requirements? Where were the gaps?
Right, the nutritional snapshot. Well, the findings showed pretty significant defificiencies. Overall energy intake, generally below the FAO requirements. That's the UN's Food and Agriculture Organization.
Okay.
Men were getting around 1970 kilocalories, women about 1720. Protein was also low, about 51 grams for men, 47 for women on average.
And how many people actually met the requirements?
Not many. Only about 11 to 13% met those energy and protein needs.
Wow, okay, so energy and protein were low. What about vitamins and minerals?
Even more stark there, really. Riboflavin, that's vitamin B2, was notably low. Only about 11% of men and maybe 14% of women met the requirement. Ascorbic acid, vitamin C, extremely low. Like only 1.3% of men and 2.6% of women got enough.
Seriously, that low for vitamin C.
Seriously low. And other things too, calcium, iron, thiamine, B1, niacin, B3, vitamin A, generally inadequate across the board.
So widespread deficiencies, did they see physical signs of this?
They did. Clinically, while most people had normal body weights, which is interesting in itself, many showed signs like small fat pads, kind of thin or atrophic skin, and significantly, 30%, nearly a third, had swollen gums.
Swollen gums, isn't that classic scurvy from vitamin C deficiency?
Exactly. It's a classic sign. And they also noted 2 subjects were blind. Though the cause wasn't specified, it could potentially link to vitamin A deficiency, too.
Okay, so the diet's deficient, the clinical signs are there, but then comes the twist, right?
This is what's truly fascinating, yes. The paradox. Despite all these clear dietary shortfalls, despite these observable signs of malnutrition like the swollen gums, the researchers reported the general health status of the subjects as satisfactory.
Satisfactory. How did they explain that? That seems like a major contradiction.
It does. And the paper offers a few possible explanations. They float the idea of long-term physiological adjustments. Like maybe the bodies of these elderly people had adapted over years to a lower intake.
Adaptation. Okay.
Second, they question the standards themselves. Maybe the FAO requirements were just too high for this specific population, or perhaps a lower intake was actually enough to prevent severe illness in their context.
Right. Context matters.
Absolutely. And then there's a really powerful point, survivor bias.
Ah, yes. You mentioned this. Explain that again.
Well, think about it. Average life expectancy in Nigeria back then was only about 47 years.
47.
Yeah. So anyone in this study who was 60 or older, they were already the survivors. They were likely a naturally robust, very resilient group just to have made it that far.
That makes a lot of sense. The frailest wouldn't have even reached that age.
Precisely. And lastly, they acknowledge, any survey method might slightly underestimate actual food intake. That's always a possibility.
Okay, so adaptation, maybe lower actual needs, definitely survivor bias, and maybe slight underreporting. That survivor bias idea is really striking, though.
It really is. It speaks volumes about the inherent resilience in this group. To be considered satisfactory by the researchers despite everything, it really challenges our standard metrics.
Did the paper dig into any other factors, like beyond just what food was available or the survivor effect, things influencing this picture?
Yeah, connecting it to the bigger picture, other things mattered. Cooking methods, for instance. They noted common practices could destroy heat-sensitive nutrients, like vitamin C again, boiling things for a long time.
Ah, so preparation could worsen the deficiencies.
Exactly. And cultural beliefs were also mentioned as playing a role. Apparently, there was some refusal to eat certain foods, milk, eggs, even meat due to traditional beliefs or superstitions.
Really? So that would directly hit things like B vitamins.
Right, affecting thiamine and riboflavin intake. So it wasn't just about availability, but also about cultural choices.
Fascinating.
And it all comes back to that theme of resilience and adaptation viewed through that survivor bias lens. It suggests this remarkable capacity to cope physiologically and culturally.
So this study really pushes us to ask, doesn't it? How does it make us rethink what adequate nutrition even means, especially when you look at such different environments, cultures, maybe even genetics?
Exactly. It forces you to consider context.
Hmm.
It's not just about hitting specific numbers on a chart, but about how the human body functions and adapts within its specific reality.
Okay, so let's try and wrap this up. To recap our deep dive into this late 70s Nigerian study, we saw a diet dominated by starchy staples like cassava and yam.
Very little animal protein, mostly just some smoked fish.
Right. Which led to pretty clear widespread nutrient deficiencies, especially things like vitamin C, riboflavin. And they saw the clinical signs, like swollen gums.
But the kicker was the finding of satisfactory general health.
Yeah, the big surprise. Explained potentially by long-term adaptation, the huge factor of survivor bias in that old group, cultural food practices, maybe some underestimation of intake.
And it leaves us with this really provocative thought straight from the paper's conclusion. The researchers actually wrote something like,
Oh, yeah. What was it?
they observed, and I'm paraphrasing slightly, that if these subjects could live to be 100, it seems like they had a better diet than healthy people in the U.S. and elsewhere who are dying off at 60.
Wow. That's quite a statement. A bit provocative, maybe.
It's definitely provocative. But it makes you wonder, doesn't it? What hidden mechanisms for longevity and health might exist in populations facing these kinds of challenges?
And what are we missing about human resilience when we just compare health stats across totally different worlds?
Exactly. It's just a powerful reminder, I think, of how context, environment, culture, history deeply shapes everything we think we know about diet, health, and the incredible adaptability of our bodies.